how we can apply His wisdom to our daily lives. Together, we will reflect on the power of faith, love, and compassion in shaping our existence.
Okay, it is a joy to have you here. We're going to be talking about learning how to communicate. We have to understand that, God is trying to communicate to us too in a pretty radical way. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. And the Word was God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. I mean, God got so intensely involved in communicating to us that He left heaven and came to earth to communicate it to us in the flesh. You have, those of you who come from a Christian perspective believe that God loved us so much that He also gave us the Bible, which is more than a tract. I mean, I would have sent something, if I was God, something like the 4 spiritual laws from heaven, but He sent us a pretty big book. In fact, most likely the Bible is one of the biggest books most of us have ever tried, to understand or read, and yet this is all part of God trying to communicate. And because you and I are made in the image of God, God is a God who communicates. Part of us being in His image is that we have this great desire to communicate as well. However, I have bad news for you. You are not in paradise, regardless of what the Florida, state will tell the rest of the country, come to paradise. You are not in paradise. You have the same address as everybody else, which is east of Eden. You see, you and I had the crazy idea that we would be better off not living in the perfect realm of God's love and compassion. And we had the idea we'd be so better off independent from God, and you only need to read the newspaper this morning to see how that's going. Okay? Of course, you could just read your own life to see how that's going. And so the bottom line is, it's not easy to communicate anymore, and it's not easy for us to communicate to each other. Quite honestly, it isn't even easy for us to communicate to our own selves. In other words, sometimes we lie to our own selves. You know that? You tell yourself lies at times. You deceive yourself about yourself. And we find it hard to communicate to God as well. So we're going to try to give you some tools. Communication is possible by the grace of God. God has allowed us to still, even east of Eden, come to an understanding of each other and communicate. However, east of Eden, it's easier to do wrong than to do right. How many of you think that's true? Yeah. In other words, it's easier to mess up. And I tell you, most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, that which comes to you and me naturally doesn't work. In other words, the way we would want to communicate doesn't work. The way we want to listen doesn't work. And so it's really hard because to do bad doesn't take training. We don't have a class on learning how to poorly communicate. Because people already kind of know they know they're doing that. Now, most of us know that the real problem isn't with us. It's because no one else in our life communicates clearly. And so we've come here, some way I'll tell you somehow, to fix them. If that's your hope, forget it, because I don't have any power over them. You can do some things differently to improve how you listen and how you communicate and how you speak and how you write. All that, you can improve yourself, but understand the 100% rule always remains as the foundation of everything we do at Living Water Counseling, everything we do at Learning How seminars. You only have control over you. You don't control anybody else. You don't control your neighbor, you don't control your spouse, you don't control your children. How many parents can say amen to that? Yeah. All ideas of controlling other people are an illusion. And it's a comforting illusion. But what you can do is you can begin, by grace of God, to learn self-control. The fruit of the Spirit is not control of others, but the fruit of the Spirit is self-control. So that's what we'll be talking about today. Let's read this together, James 1, 19 and 20. It's a classic passage, but well worth remembering, so let's read it together. This you know, my beloved brethren, but everyone must be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. For the anger of man does not achieve the righteousness of God. Now this is the reverse. We are slow to listen. We are quick to speak. And we are usually quick-tempered, especially when someone has the audacity to think differently than we think, feel differently than we feel, or do something differently than how we would do it. And so Anger, in fact, anger is the most powerful emotion we feel. And by the way, there is a good use of anger. That's in our Learning How to Manage Anger seminar. You can get that from Janet's on CD. But the bottom line is that most of our anger, our undisciplined anger, our undirected anger, our unprocessed anger, it can't bring anything good into the world. It's not that powerful. In fact, it won't make things right. It won't bring God's right way of living into the universe. We think anger can move mountains. Isn't that what Jesus said? The anger of a mustard seed can move a mountain, No, that wasn't quite what he said, right? No, it was faith. Well, then we have to talk about what in the world is that faith? Well, let's read James 3, 1 and 2, because James has quite a bit to talk about communication. He said, well, be quick to listen to others, be slow to speak, be slow to get angry. Now he says James 3, 1, 2. Let's read this out loud. Let not many of you become teachers, my brethren, knowing that as such we will incur a stricter judgment. For we will all stumble in many ways. If anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able to bridle the whole body as well. And James, by the way, is assuming you know you're not perfect. How many of you know you're not perfect? Okay, we're safe here. So he's saying everyone messes up in what they say. One of the things you're going to have to do somewhere in your life is apologize to someone and tell them, I shouldn't have said that. So you might as well just say that out loud. Just repeat after me. I shouldn't have said that. Said that. See, the world didn't end. You just admitted something, and the universe didn't create. You could admit you made a mistake in what you said, and it wasn't the end of the world. See, the ways of a person are always right in their own eyes, and therefore the hardest thing for us to ever admit is oops. Okay? But that's really just honesty, humility, reality. Sometimes we don't, and sometimes always silence is a mistake. Because sometimes we should say something, and we don't. Or sometimes our tongue should proclaim something, and we don't say it. And so just being silent. And see, this is a verse that I keep in front of me because, see, the Lord and I, Norm is an introvert and would be really happy reading books, writing, and only interacting with a small number of people, okay? But God said, no, I'm going to use you, and I'm going to use you as a teacher. And then I started to read verses like this, and I said, oh, Lord, have mercy. And so I talked to God many times about quitting. Well, Lord, this is kind of dangerous. And so I take this very seriously because I say a lot of words. I speak lots more publicly than most people ever do, and I have all these words coming out of my mouth. And this verse says, oh, God's going to hold you more responsible for all that. So I have to constantly be saying, oh, Lord, have mercy on my soul. I was a youth director way back when, yes, there was a day when I was a youth director. And I went to and I came to realize that what I had been teaching the young people on a critical point of doctrine was wrong. And it was like this radical moment in my life. I suddenly realized, I had taught them sincerely, but here I was at the great mature age of 17 being a youth director. And so with all the wisdom of a 17-year-old passing on what other people had taught me, and then at about 19 I have an awakening and I said, oh my goodness, the Bible doesn't teach what I thought it was. Yikes! So I had to call up all these people in my youth group and say, listen, what I taught you was wrong. Now also, by the way, I've got kicked out of Bible college at this point because they kind of didn't like my repentance so much. They weren't too happy because they thought they were right and I thought they were wrong. And so it was a messy deal. And so I called all these folks, and they, of course, all said, Norm, you're crazy now. So they didn't, not too many of them were too much open to my retraction. But I had to do that because I was hurting so bad, thinking, look, I'd had this responsibility of teaching them, and I taught them something not true. That's a horrible feeling. Now, God, by His grace, even forgives something that bad. And by the way, that's about the worst thing you can do. And ever since that experience, I've tried to be very careful in processing it, and yet I know, only a perfect person would never make mistakes. So I have to always be asking myself, I re-listen to my sermons, and my teaching, and I try to pick up, did I make a mistake? Because sometimes, by the way, what's in my head may not come out of this mouth. Have you ever had that problem? I thought I said this, but I really said that. Oops. So you see, all those things are true. Now, by the way, God has mercy on people who sin. That's why Christ died, because there's hope for people not perfect. Isn't that nice to know? By the way, if you've been pretending to be perfect because you thought if you admitted you weren't perfect, you would be destroyed, there is hope in the gospel, okay? There is second and third and fourth and fifth chances, but we're never to take those chances to become, not diligent in trying to do right. Grace is to lead us to greater efforts of being better, which I'm glad you're all here this morning, because that means you're working on that. Proverbs 13, 1 through 3, let's read this. The one who guards his mouth preserves his life, and the one who opens wide his lips comes to ruin. When I say read, I mean out loud together. I know you're reading mentally, but project. The bottom line is guard, mean watch what you say. Think before you speak. You don't get any extra points in life for speed. Speed kills. So take that 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Ponder for a moment what's going to come out. You can, by the way, you can think faster than people can speak. This causes you to kind of start just monitoring what they say and start thinking about your response before they're finished, which, by the way, we'll find out is not a good way to listen. And then what you can't do, because you've got so much being built up, you can't wait to interrupt them. And also, you're not really thinking about what you're going to say. It's this this is what I call emotional vomit. And that's what the proverb says here. The one who opens wide his lips comes to ruin. When you emotionally vomit, when you verbally vomit, you really wreck relationships. Have you noticed that? I was just being honest. Yeah. Well, next time you're sick, vomit in someone's lap and see how sympathetic they are about your upset stomach. Because just because your soul is upset, just because your emotions are upset, doesn't mean you have the right to vomit all over somebody. Because they'll do you a favor. Do you know there's a thing called sympathetic vomiting? My son suffers from this condition. If one person in the car vomited, guess what? 2 vomited. Because one son had the vomit with the other person. What empathy. What a mess. So if you verbally vomit on someone, guess what they'll do? They'll happily verbally vomit back on you. And boy, does that get messy. So instead, this is an area, words, James will go on to say, words are like throwing a match into tinder. They can catch on fire. Be very careful. Your words are very powerful. Words have power. And so we need to be cautious. We do need to, like I said, silence isn't a way out. One of the old spiritual disciplines that I think has value is silence. And so sometimes what we do is a silent retreat, and we will have people come in and we work through a group of internal processes. And people will spend the whole day, we'll come together, we do this at night, get everybody kind of thinking through, explaining what the process is, giving them some disciplines to do during the day. And then in the morning, everybody comes together for breakfast, but no one says a word. The reality is that they come to the breakfast in the morning, and no one speaks. They then go through prayer and study and process, come to lunch, and no one speaks. They then come to dinner, and no one's speaking to another human being the whole day. They're practicing silence before God, only speaking to God. And then that evening we come together, and people communicate to each other what God spoke to them. Now, for most Americans, they've never had 8 hours of silence. They also no TV, no radio, no cell phone. Oh my goodness. It is interesting. I keep thinking people become more devoted to prayer because it gets very confusing. Because I see people in a private space, I look at them from the rear, and I see their head bowed. And I started to think, boy, the world is becoming more devout. And then I look at it and it's this, But I don't know, maybe this is the new God. I'm not really quite sure. But, it's just amazing, But I see all these people with bowed heads. I see more people with bowed heads now than ever before, But it gets me confused. I was at Starbucks. I thought 2 guys were having a prayer meeting. They're at the same table, I came over and got a new angle. They were both looking at their phone. Not looking at each other, looking at their phone. They might have been texting each other. It's within the realm of, possibility. But anyway, so the thing is, see, silence isn't even, though I think that discipline of silence is important. This was really the idea. Maybe if we don't say anything, we can avoid sin, but sometimes you sin by not saying anything. So you see, communication, it's tricky, see. Well, this is what's going on. There's an internal world inside you, what you think and what you feel. Now, the first thing is, you don't have complete knowledge of everything you're thinking and feeling, because you can be in denial, you can have shut some stuff off, but of all the people on this planet that are human, you have the best idea of what you think and feel. But do understand, you can be deceiving yourself, you can be hiding some stuff, that's a subconscious, there's this whole dynamic, but there's this internal world. Now there's what other people are thinking and feeling as well. Key point. What goes on in another person's head and what goes on in another person's heart is not the same as what goes on in your head and your heart. If you sit in a mall and you ever just watch people going by, you have to recognize each individual person, wonderfully and mysteriously made in the image of God, has their own unique, one-of-the-world internal universe. And there may be similarities. They may think like you on some things in some way, but they most likely don't think those things for the same reasons. They most likely came to their conclusion for a different reason than you did. Their process of actually coming to the conclusion. I have a friend, John Stevenson. He's the best Bible teacher I know. And John and I got to be friends, and he, I'm what they call, in fact, I passed this on to my kids. We found this out as we had psychiatrists talking to a couple of my children. Global thinkers, okay? So our global thinkers are actually wired differently in our brains, and we're the small percentage, like 2% of the people that sight words will work on. In other words, we can't learn through phonics, whereas 98% of the people do learn through phonics. And so we are wired. So when I'm learning Hebrew in seminary, they're teaching it phonetically. I can't get it. I figured this out. I start using whole words. It works for me. Wouldn't it work for any more than 2% of the population? Because you see, we're wired different. My internal world operates differently than your internal world, even in how our learning style. That's one of the ways when we're trying to teach somebody something, we say, well, why aren't they getting it? Well, maybe they're wired different. Maybe they're a visual learner and you're sending audio. Maybe they're an audio, you're sending visual. Maybe they learn by feeling and doing. See, all this stuff really has an impact. But understand that person is not you. And they don't mean to offend you by not being you. Don't take it personally. In fact, you have to give them the right to be who God made them. And you have to give them a right to be on their journey, which is going to be different than your journey. And so we have to agree to be different. We have to agree to disagree. And we can't be upset that they're not clones of us. Because, by the way, however upset you get, will it make them a clone of you? No. So for that reason. And then what we think and feel about others, the bottom line, do you know that people have opinions about you? If you don't, trust me, they do. And so they've come to all kinds of evaluations and thoughts about you. They've even thought, they think what they know you think and what you feel, which may or may not be accurate, because they might be basing it on assumptions, or they may be projecting their own feelings and thoughts onto you, or they may have listened to you incorrectly or gotten the wrong message from something you said, or they may be right. And you, by the way, have an opinion, have thoughts and feelings about every person in your life. Every single person in your village, about 150, 200 people in your network of people, you have some evaluations. If somebody came up to you and said, listen, what do you think about so-and-so? And you really believed, you could be honest with them, you would be able to communicate feelings and thoughts about that person. Positive, negative. And so you see, that's why. Now, also, ultimately, God knows us. He alone. God's thoughts about us God's feelings about us are 100% accurate. And so basically, God alone really knows me. I have to ask the Lord, reveal to me my heart. Because, see, the heart is deceitful, what person can know it? There's a part of me that I may not be able to fully comprehend, so I have to even ask for God's help. Now, the key here is the communication. We decide to share what we think and feel with others. They decide to share with us. Sometimes we may even share what we think about them. That always is where usually the arguments begin, right? About that point where we start sharing some evaluation, that's where things go south many times, right? Unless we give, by the way, you could evaluate someone positively, a compliment. Oh, boy, I didn't even think about that, did we? And through prayer, as I said, God can share, and through His Word, through the Spirit and the Word, we can come to some better understanding of our own self. Sometimes I'll be reading the Scripture, and suddenly the Holy Spirit will strike me very strongly, and I will see myself more clearly. I'll see something real. How many people are getting a little warm? Anybody else outside me? A couple? Okay. We have 4 air conditioners here that don't talk to each other. They do not communicate. But the good news is we have 4 air conditioners. Can you imagine being in Africa and not having any air conditioners? You got to come to my seminar. Now, Frank would be happy because there would be no microphone either. And so we would have solved that problem. In solving every problem. Now, in a short time, some of you are going to be freezing. So go ahead and raise your hand, and then we'll heat up again. Isn't it wonderful? East of Eden. Always a problem. Well, some biblical examples of how hard it is to communicate. It says, so Moses spoke thus to the sons of Israel. He was telling them, listen, God is going to save you. He's teaching them the gospel. God is going to keep His promises. This is good news. But they did not listen to Moses. Read it, the rest of it with me. On account of their despondency and cruel bondage. They were depressed. They were in tough times. And it didn't matter how well Moses said it, they weren't going to be able to hear. Because where was their focus? What was consuming their lives? Somebody tell me. Yeah, their pain. He comes with the gospel. He says, God is for you. God is sending deliverance. God is going to take you out of Egypt. God is going to keep His promises. And they don't hear Him because they're in so much pain. Gordon.
Holy Spirit alive and active.
Sure. The Holy Spirit has always been alive and active. However, bottom line is at times, we're not exactly in tune with the Holy Spirit. So, understand that they didn't hear, not because of Moses' method of communication, but because they were in a state. Understand when you're trying to talk to someone. Have I ever tried to give counsel to a drunk person? I have. Anybody else ever tried to do that? Somebody really drunk, and you try to give them good counsel about how to not drink. Isn't that great? How often has that worked? Not too often, right? Because they're not in a state. They may not even remember what you said. I mean, I had one dear friend. He was an alcoholic, and we were on a college campus, and he was trying to not get with the security, so I had stuck him up the back hallway, and so I had him in a room, and he was vomiting, and I was the designated care person of the evening, and so I was helping him get through this really bad night, and all night long he said, because, you know, he'd mixed things that should not be mixed, wine, beer, vodka, whatever. And all night after he got done vomiting, he would tell me with great sincerity, never again, Norm, never again, never again. Well, it was 2 weeks. Never was a short period of time. Okay? So figure out if a person is really, really, really like overwhelmed. Like if you go to a funeral, it is not the time to say a whole lot. Because the most they're going to be able to hear is, I love you, I care for you, but don't go off on a dissertation about the problem of evil. Okay? Because they're in a state where what they need to know is somebody loves them. You need to communicate love to them, but they're not going to remember a whole lot of anything you say anyway. When I'm doing a wedding, I am not talking to the couple in front of me. Because if I was giving marriage counsel to the couple in front of me, how effective would that be? They're not in a state. All they're thinking about, when do we get out of here? Because it is time to get married and go on. And they're thinking about each other, and they're not thinking about what the pastor's saying. I'm talking to the audience. I know that. So you have to be realistic. Moses here, he's frustrated. I came with good news to them, but they couldn't hear. Notice what Moses does. He doesn't think that the fault was theirs. He thinks the fault was his. It says, now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, go tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to let the sons of Israel go out of the land. But Moses spoke before the Lord, saying, behold, the sons of Israel not listen to me. My own people don't listen to me. And you want me to go to Pharaoh? Give me a break. How then will Pharaoh listen to me? Notice, for Israel is despondent. That isn't why he thinks it happened. Why does he think it happened? You read to me, for I am unskilled in speech. Moses had some kind of speech impediment, and he was very aware of it. He in some way stuttered. He had something that he didn't see. That's why he wants Aaron to come and be his mouthpiece. But this is really a focus of his. I can't communicate because I don't speak well. That's Moses' issue. And so he's saying, my own people, because I am such a lousy speaker. And that's why they didn't hear me. I understand Moses. See, I had to be in speech therapy up to the 6th grade, and they only stopped because I don't think they offered it in junior high in those days. And my 5th grade teacher came and listened to my first sermon, and she came by and shook my hand and says, I now believe in miracles. Because no one could understand me. I didn't say one word until I was 3 years old. So it's only by the grace of God. God has a sense of humor. Here, I think I'll use him. He's totally useless in this, so we'll let him be a speaker, okay? So here, I got an introvert with a speech impediment. Great choice. Let's go make him a teacher, okay? He has a sense of humor, I have to admit. It's all him. It's not me. But we will find out why Pharaoh did not listen to Moses. It wasn't because Moses hadn't communicated well, yet Pharaoh's heart was hardened and he did not listen to them as the Lord had said. Pharaoh had closed himself off. He wasn't interested in listening. By the way, we can harden ourselves towards another person's message. Sometimes people will be trying to tell you something, and you even know, part of you knows this is true, but you just close yourself off. I'm not going to listen to this. I'm not going to hear this. You just close yourself off. That's called hardening of heart. It doesn't matter how well they said it. I'm just not going to listen to this. I've already made up my mind. See, that's bias. I know what reality is. Don't affect me with the facts. Thank you very much. So I'm going to keep believing what I believe, and whatever you say, I'm not changing my mind. You harden your heart. Well, there are people, we do have to understand, how many people know that there are people that lie to you? Yeah. I won't ask the harder question, how many of you lied? It's a more penetrating question. Anyway, the Bible's very honest. There's some people that do know the power of words, and they use words to deceive other people to get what they want. There are con people. There's con people just after your money. There's con people who are after, you joining their group or cause for power. There's con people that want both power and money. And of course, some of those con people come in the name of religion. It's that simple, okay? And so, all those things have to kind of be put there's a movie that was kind of a leap of faith. It's an old movie. Look it up. It's really a good movie in regard to dealing with the struggle of someone who was using religion really for deception, but also kind of has an interesting how God intervened in that. So if you want to see a movie on that theme, Leap of Faith, you can look it up, Amazon it or whatever. But notice Romans 16:18, for such men are slaves, talking about people who were in fact doing evil, not of our Lord Messiah, Christ Jesus, but of their own appetites, their own desires. By the way, you see, we're all slave of something. Some people can be a slave to the Messiah Jesus. If not, you're a slave to something else, something inside you. and by their smooth and flattering speech. See, they're good speakers. They use words well. They deceive the hearts of the unsuspecting. So part of it is we do have to have a filter up. See, your duty as a listener today is to be open to what I'm saying, but thoughtful about what I'm saying, discerning about what I'm saying, and you have to decide, and it's your responsibility before God to decide, what did Norm say that is true? What did Norm say that I don't know? Might be true, might not be true. What did Norm say that was false? Because you as an adult have a responsibility to always be evaluating every idea that you get and saying, is this something I should accept, or something I should study, or something I should reject? And quite honestly, see, my responsibility is to try to make sure that everything I'm saying is true. We talked about that earlier. That's a very weighty responsibility for anyone who teaches. However, your responsibility of hearing is not just to accept everything you hear, and this includes Sunday morning. It includes every time you're ever hearing any message from anyone. But what is true, what is I don't know? By the way, it's okay if you don't know. Sometimes you have to think about something for a while. You have to research something for a while. That's okay. That's called human. I do have bad news for you. You are not God, okay? You do not have anything where you can instantaneously know that's true and that's false. Sometimes it's okay to say, I don't know. And so you research it. That's human. God doesn't have to do research. If you never research anything, you do believe you're God. Because it means that I instantaneously know what's good or false. I don't have to look up anything. I don't have to study anything. I don't have to evaluate anything. I don't have to think about anything. Well, no, but when you do that, you have to understand you're actually claiming to be God. But notice, there are some people who are deceiving, and because people are unsuspecting, they don't have a guard up, they can be led astray. So, guard your hearts with all diligence. Proverbs 4:23. Guard your hearts. Guard your soul. Guard your mind with all diligence. And you're the only one who can guard it. I can't guard it. It's your internal world, not mine. I have to guard Norm's heart. 1 John 2:24. These things I've written to you concerning those who are trying to deceive you. There are people who really, they're con men. These are religious con men. They're just out to deceive you. They know they're trying to deceive you. But evil people and charlatans will go from bad to worse, deceiving others and being deceived themselves. Well, now we got two. One, they're deceiving others, but they themselves have bought. They say a good con person has to, in fact, kind of go through a mental trip where they believe what they're conning people about. They kind of have to go into an illusionary world where they think they really do own the Brooklyn Bridge. Okay? Because it's the only way they can convince somebody to buy it. Okay? So they deceive themselves as well. So we have to understand, we have to have some guard up. And the problem when we lie, what do we lose when we lie to someone and we get caught in the lie? What happens in the relationship? What do we lose? Trust. Yeah, we lose trust. Well, there's some distinctions. Some deception is sincere. Sometimes I tell you what I sincerely believe, I'm still deceiving you. This means I wasn't prudent enough in research, and I wasn't cautious enough, but because I'm not God, this can happen. And what is my responsibility when I find out I was wrong? I need to go back, apologize, but also say I made a mistake and explain, that I told you that wasn't true. Now, this has really helped if we remember the words. These are important words. Be careful in claiming a fact, because a fact should be able to be checked out by an objective source. A fact should be something that you can point to, some objective source and say, the reason this is a fact is because of this out here, outside of me. This is my opinion. My bank just told me there's $55 in my bank account. Okay, so why do I think there's $55 in my bank account? The bank told me. This is different than I think there's $55 in my bank account. Or I feel there's $55 in my bank account. Because you see, reality might be totally different. There might be zero in my bank account. So you see, a fact is something that's subjective. Now, most of us do not use these words. We'll talk about that. We normally don't say, well, I believe, I think, I feel, it's my opinion, because we want the other people to accept our reality as fact. And unfortunately, you see, that can lead to deception, because maybe what we're passing on is just our opinion. We stated it as a fact. They took it in as a fact. And now what they really have is they think our opinion, which was wrong, was a fact. But if you say, I believe, then actually you're more honest, because all they could say, Norm believes, well, it is true, Norm believes, but what Norm believes might not be true. You see the distinction. So if we make this mistake, the mistake is primarily we're passing on our opinions as though they're facts. Now, some deception is not sincere. I know I'm lying to you, I planned to lie to you, and I had good reason to lie to you. And usually to gain some kind of power and control, or to avoid some harm. Some people simply lie to protect themselves. If I tell them the truth, they won't like me anymore. If I tell the truth, I'll lose my job. One of the hardest times of my life in telling, and going in communication was I was working at a place, and there was a coworker, a peer with me, and he had different color skin than I. And so we got at McDonald's one day, and he shared with me what he was getting paid. And we had exactly identical job descriptions and identical experience, identical everything. There was only one difference between us, and that was color of skin. And his pay was substantially less than my pay. Well, that bothered me. And so, there was a staff meeting every week, and the boss was there. And then after the thing, and I had been praying all night. My stomach was all upset. I needed this job. Have you ever needed a job? Yeah. Have you ever said, if I don't have this job, I won't be able to survive? Yeah, I was living paycheck to paycheck, and usually I was behind on the paychecks. I didn't have borrowing from your paycheck back then, so it was like, neither my peer or I was making great money. I've done all kinds of things. I've worked in factories. I've dug ditches. I actually have done, they actually will pay you if you go out and you pick berries and stuff and put them in little boxes. You come at the end of the day, they weigh them, and they pay you by many berries you get. If you do a good job, they give you a free bag of potatoes, which I felt really good when I got that free bag of potatoes. And so I've been in all kinds of different places doing all kinds of different things. So this was not like a high-tech type job. This was like a low, physical labor type job. So I went up to the boss, and I said, listen, I'm really thankful for this job. I'm thankful for the opportunity, but I've got something that happened. And I told him the story about McDonald's, and I said, I just can't understand what's going on here, and I don't know if you can help me understand this, but this just doesn't seem right. And he did not respond well to this communication. He got very angry. Can you imagine that? And he used many colorful adjectives. And he was all, and I figured, well, yes, I've done it again. Unemployment is coming. And I'm going to have to explain how I lost this job. Okay, so here we go. But he didn't fire me, which I thought was a miracle. I went out. I'm all really, no sleep that night. Well, next pay period, my friend came up all excited at McDonald's. He said, you never guess what happened. What happened? My pay went up. They gave me a raise. Now, no communication was ever, there was no communication about how what I said was right. But the bottom line is that, but you see, it would have been a lot easier. Silence would have protected me. See? And in this case, he was saying things which weren't true to some extent, most likely because that was protecting him and the corporation. Some people deceive to protect themselves. Some people lie to protect others. We have, by the way, the people in Israel where you had midwives, and they wrongly report to Pharaoh and say, oh no, we don't get there in time to get the babies because they are very vigorous. Well, you had people save Jews in World War II because they said, oh no, there aren't any Jews in this neighborhood, and they were up in the attic. That's my class on ethics, okay, we got to go there. But in other words, sometimes what we're doing is saying, well, if I tell the truth, other people will be harmed. Some people deceive to profit from others or gain control. I just want to control you. I want to take advantage of you. I want to use you. Therefore, I lie to you. Because the lies give me more power. One of the greatest lies people do, this is one of the most common lies, they try to make you responsible for their bad behavior. You ever have anybody do that? Someone will say, they will, hurt you. They'll swear at you. And you say, you shouldn't have called me that name. You made me do it. If only you weren't always late, I wouldn't have to swear at you if you weren't so frustrating. I mean, you are such a useless person. Wow. Well, you see, they didn't confess anything. They are using words to control you, so you'll feel guilty and you won't confront them with their problem. Trust. Once we lose trust has to usually be regained by degrees. Once a person catches me in some kind of falsehood, then they never know for sure when I am telling the truth or I'm not telling the truth. And they will have to see me demonstrate trustworthy behavior over a period of time. By the way, if you do make a mistake in communication or if you lie, if you confess and don't wait for them to catch you, by the way, I'll tell you something, most people do get caught in given time. Have you ever noticed that? I mean, over a period of time, you get caught, right? By the way, one day you're all going to get caught. I'm going to get caught because the judgment seat of Christ is coming. And it says that which is done in secret will be proclaimed from the housetops. And so everybody gets caught in the end of the story. It is appointed unto a person once to die, and then comes a judgment. So every bad thing I've done, every bad thing you've done, we're going to have to confess up. Nothing remains hidden. So, reality check. If I get caught and I don't confess I did wrong until I get caught, does that build trust or kind of not build trust? Doesn't build trust. I might even apologize and be sincere, but no one knows, well, are you sorry about what you did or are you sorry you got caught? Very hard to know, see, at that point. But if, in fact, I say to myself, in the heat of the moment, I lied, I deceived, and I shouldn't have done that. And I come to the other person and I say to them, listen, yesterday we had that conversation and, I was really afraid if I told you the truth, you'd be upset. And anyway, there is no justification for it. The bottom line is, I lied. Please forgive me. That's still going to be hard for the person, but do they have a reason to begin trusting you? Yeah, because you didn't have to do that. You might have gotten away with it. See? And so you can rebuild trust really by being proactive in confession. But that's a hard thing to do, isn't it? But basically regaining trust after we have been seen to not be truthful takes time. Now, by the way, someone can make a mistake. They can think you've not been truthful when you have been. That's even harder because then, you have this basic fundamental difference. I think you lied to me, and I don't think I lied to you. Well, you have a lot to overcome in communication at that point. We trust two things about a person. We trust their character. Can I trust that they are basically a person of integrity, striving to do the right thing by the grace of God? And their competence. Are they able to handle things? Are they able to handle the relationship? Are they able to handle life? And so, by the way, you can trust someone's competence, and they're able, but you don't trust their character. You can go to a auto mechanic and know he does really great work, but you also know you better stand there because he might charge you for parts he doesn't repair. And then there's a person who you trust. They would give you a shirt off the back. You go to that guy, and you don't have to be in there with him, but you also know your car may not be working when he gets done fixing it. So he's very competent in character, but he's not competent. You can't trust him to know what he's doing. And other people, you can trust their character, but you can't trust that they really have the skills to handle it. Well, the basic format of communication is this. Sometimes we are senders. We have messages we want to communicate, and we choose a means. We can choose words. We can choose silence, by the way. Silence can communicate. We can choose writing to send a message more and more. In fact, used to be letters were, there, but, now with email and stuff, writing is becoming a much more major form of communication. We communicate through body language. How I move my body communicates something to people. If we see someone pointing their finger at somebody, if someone's talking to me and they're pointing their finger. Have you noticed some people can't talk without their hands? I mean, if you remove some people's hands, they wouldn't be able to talk. Okay? Because, they need their hands. I saw a lady the other day on her cell phone, and I don't know who she was talking to, but I know it was an emotional conversation. Because the hands were all over, okay? This hand had to hold the phone, but this hand was like she was conducting an orchestra, okay, with this hand. And I didn't know what to do. Wow, I prayed for her, I went, oh Lord, I don't know what that conversation. An hour later, done my grocery shopping. She's still on the phone in her car, has her phone hooked in and plugged in, okay, to some electric source, and she's still conducting that orchestra. So that was a heavy-duty conversation. But you see, she was communicating something to me, even though I couldn't hear a word she was saying, just in her body language. I knew she was upset. Knew she was passionate. I knew there was something going on just in what her body said. Our tone of voice. Someone can say, I love you. And they can say it with tenderness. Someone can say, I love you. And see, it's the same words, but the tone of voice, the inflection. All of these things are ways that we communicate. So the sender sends out things. And by the way, the sender may or may not be conscious of a lot of things they're sending out. They don't know what their body's doing. They may not. That lady was not conscious. She wasn't saying, I'm going to move my arm right before nobody. So the person on the other phone was not able to see this hand motion, okay? She wasn't even conscious that she was sending that message out. She wasn't conscious to say, move my arm so I can express my emotional state. It wasn't happening. So our tone of voice. Have you ever had somebody say, I didn't yell at you, and you were pretty sure they were yelling at you? You ever had that experience? Because in their mind, they were just sharing passionately. What you heard, you heard someone angry. You see? Well, so we transmit the message. The receiver, we detect the message, and sometimes we hear it well. Sometimes, you can have physical hindrances to hearing the message. You can have the fact that you're just kind of blocking it out. You don't even get the message because you're really thinking about what you're going to tell them, not what they're going to tell you. I've had people where I can look at them eye to eyeball, and I will say something to them. As a teacher, this is real important. I teach at a university as well. So sometimes what I'll do in the class, I'll make a point, and then I say, can someone tell me just what I said? And I'll ask the question, I just said this like 30 seconds ago, and the whole class will be looking at me like deers in a headlight. Because they were physically there, their ears were physically able to hear, but their mind was somewhere else. Now that we're going to see, what I asked for was feedback. Without feedback, I cannot know if anything's happening. You're going to have some feedback at the end here. You're going to be asked to do a survey on this. This gives me a little bit of feedback. Well, what did they hear? What was their experience of what happened here and stuff like that? If you didn't get one, get it on the table. Get one and put it in the box there before you leave, because I'm interested in getting that feedback. But you see, without feedback, you don't know. Because you see, a person's body can be here, their ears can be here, the physical idea that hearing could be taking place could be here, but in actuality, nothing's happening. Because again, you see, we can get locked into our own heads. You could be thinking about, when is lunch? I don't know, I can't read minds. Bottom line is also, by the way, the sender can send out a trigger to you. They'll use a word or a phrase that triggers your emotions, and you stop at that point. I could say something, and it triggers something, and instantly your mind is just flooded with all kinds of ideas or feelings. And during that time, when all that flood comes out, when I've triggered you, you don't hear a word I'm saying, and then you have to kind of, oh, wait a minute, where am I? Okay? You can be tired. You just nod off. And so even though you're here, and it seems like you might be here, really, you're in la-la land. So you see, even that part. Then I detect it, but then I interpret it. Understand, the person gets your message, they're going to interpret it in their own way. How they understand your words may not be the way you meant those words to be understood. You might say, I love you. They might interpret that, I want to have sex with you. Well, that isn't what you meant. Okay? But that's the way. Or it says, I love you. Oh, I can take advantage of you. See, it all depends how that person's understanding love. So we have to understand there's a ton of issues also in interpretation. That person has a worldview. They have a pair of glasses. They have a grid of interpretation. And so they may interpret your sentence. They may interpret your words. They may interpret your actions totally different than how you meant them to be interpreted. And that's why the last point, feedback, is so important. The person who receives the message needs to give you feedback. Now, this is what's lacking in most communication. Because this feedback normally doesn't include an echo. It usually just is a feedback of the person's reaction to what they thought you said. They don't confirm the message. So they say, you talk to somebody and they get angry and you're surprised? You ever have that? You're just talking, but they get all, what happened? Well, usually we don't even find out, because usually when they get angry, what do? We return the favor. And so usually then you get two elevated people. Neither one is interested any longer in listening. You feel you've been treated unjustly because they got mad at you for no reason. You didn't ask the reason, because you knew in your own mind you didn't say anything that anybody should get angry about. And they're upset because they're convinced that you said something very painful and very hurtful. And so because there's no understanding, you just both get elevated, and then we're back to James 1, and the anger of human beings does not work God's righteousness on the earth.
Convince me, because there's no fact. In fact, there's this conflict.
Okay, this is a basic, some of you may not have heard what she said. She had a friend who came convinced of reincarnation. The reason for their faith in reincarnation was a personal experience. The number one reason many people come to believe in something is because of personal experience. Is that not true? I mean, how do commercials on TV try to convince you to buy their product? Do they give you all the facts about the product so that you can rationally see that it's the best? No. They get you to try to feel, have an experience, and they put someone up that used the product. I was watching this gym machine, they're selling gym machines. And what they do is I went on the gym machine and I used this gym machine and I used to weigh 350 pounds and now I'm 98. And it's all because I used the gym machine, okay? And it's the personal testimony of that person's experience. And we say, oh, I weigh 350 pounds. I just have to buy one of these gym machines and I will, you buy the gym machine and it sits there and, your cat is taking naps on it. And, but the thing is, you thought magically by getting the gym machine, you'd lose weight. But you see, that's what they pass on their experience as a basis of everyone who buys a gym machine is going to lose weight. Some people who buy the gym machine lose weight, okay? Those people who use it, okay? But the reality is, so that's no comment. Now, what happened is, if I become passionate about something, I want you to also believe what I believe. Why? Why am I disturbed if you don't believe what I believe? Well, because then I might not be right. See, now that would make me nervous. You mean there's another human being, there's another person out here that might disagree. And then you say, I've got a problem. I had this experience, but there's this other information. And this other person doesn't agree with my experience because of their experience and also because of other information. In this case, because of the Bible. Well, then that would lead to another discussion. Well, why should I care what the Bible says? Well, there's all kinds of discussions you can have. But you see, the problem is I want affirmation from my friends especially, because I want my inner circle to be cheerleaders of my worldview, because it gives me security. I want everyone I'm close to agree with me about what reality is, because I don't want to doubt in any way that maybe I don't have it all together. See? And so what happens is, in this case, this person says, well, if you're not going to agree with me, I am going to get you out of my life. Because I'm going to go find friends who will accept my experience as fact. Now, wait, experience is valid. No one can debate your experience. They can debate your interpretation of the experience. I can't tell you what you have experienced or not experienced, but I can debate whether you've rightly interpreted the experience. Because you see, every experience, every experience has more than one interpretation. But by the way, never tell anybody they didn't experience something. Anyway, you try to do that? If you ever tell somebody you didn't experience that, don't do that. You ever try to tell somebody they didn't feel something? Yeah, don't tell. Ever try to tell somebody they don't think that? You're not on real solid ground there. How do you know what they're thinking outside them telling you? How do you know what they're feeling? And, really, unless you think they're really a horrible liar, and unless you have some reason not to trust them, most of the time our judgment at church, if someone says, I experienced something, you're going to want to say, okay, you experienced it. However, that doesn't mean you accept the interpretation of their experience. So that feedback, very important and difficult. Okay, and most of the time, by the way, we're not checking and say, let me see if I understand what you said. We don't do that. We think we got the message. We assume we listened correctly, and then we usually send back either a positive or negative feedback to the person. And sometimes, in fact, there's confusion because our feedback doesn't make any sense based on what the person, we thought the person said.
Thank you for choosing to be part of the Wise Living Water podcasts with Dr. Norman Wise. We hope these podcasts serve as a source of inspiration and enlightenment as we grow in our faith together. Our content is designed to offer wisdom, encouragement, and guidance for those seeking a deeper connection with their faith. Whether you're just beginning your spiritual exploration or have been on this path for years, there's something here for everyone. If you have any comments or suggestions about today's message, please send an email to wiselivingwaterchannel@gmail.com.